Some of you might remember the Earn It Act from 2 years ago that was being pushed by senators to chip away at Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which originally was proposed in 1996 to try and censor the internet. Now, luckily, the EFF was able to get the anti-free speech provisions of the Communications Decency Act struck down by the Supreme Court. But Section 230 remained, which states, "No provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider." So what that means in English is that essentially, if you create a platform like YouTube, you are not liable for any of the sick, illegal, messed up stuff that some people might upload to your platform. Well, unfortunately, the Earn It Act did not fully die. Now we have the Earn It Act of 2022, which is a bill proposed to Congress to establish a National Commission on Online Child Sexual Exploitation Prevention and for other purposes. Gee, I wonder what those other purposes might be. It almost seems as if the other purposes are the real reason for this bill. And as usual, the "think of the children, oh no, the poor children." That's just a motive there to get scared parents to be in favor of this bill and, of course, in favor of the politicians who created this bill, since it is an election year after all, and these scumbags will do anything they can to get positive press about them, even when it's clearly false, even when it's an obvious straw man that they're creating. And you can easily confirm this by just looking at Richard Blumenthal's Twitter. He's stating that the Earn It Act is very simple about whether tech companies should be held responsible for their complicity in the sexual abuse and exploitation of children when they refuse to report or remove images of these crimes hosted on their platforms. Now, that would be a pretty bad thing if it was actually happening, right? It would be pretty bad if they were using Section 230 to just get away with allowing this abuse to spread all throughout the internet. Because like I said earlier, tech companies are not legally liable whenever users post illegal things like CSAM onto their platforms. However, despite not being legally responsible for these images and these posts, tech companies almost always do end up reporting and then removing the images. And they do this for a number of reasons. One, well, okay, this one's probably not very likely, but maybe the owners of these different platforms do have some kind of a moral compass. So when the worst of the worst happens, which is, at least in my opinion, a child being abused, they remove those posts. But the more likely reason, and what I'm pretty sure the real reason is why these companies actually do take action against CSAM, is the fact that, by and large, social media platforms belong to publicly traded companies. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Snapchat, these are all publicly traded companies, or at least they are owned, their parent companies who own them are. And so when horrible things are posted to these platforms, the companies take action so that they can keep these stockholders happy. If Facebook or Twitter just allowed rampant CSAM posting on their platforms and they just kick back like, oh, we ain't gonna do anything about it, guys, whatever. This is free speech. We're not going to infringe on this. Then their stock would be doing even worse than it is right now. None of these companies, even smaller companies that don't have a publicly traded stock, have used Section 230 as an excuse to allow CSAM on their platforms. Not a single one. Because if something like that were leaked to the press, then it would just be the end of the platform. I mean, imagine if Jack Dorsey or whoever is in charge of Twitter right now was outed, if there was a private conversation recorded of him saying, oh yeah, we're aware that there's pedos on our platform that are grooming and abusing young kids, but we just don't care. You see this thing over here? It's Section 230. It means that I'm not legally responsible for anything that people do on my platform, so not my problem. If that happened, if that is actually what was going on, then people would abandon that platform. People might actually go to Jack Dorsey or whoever is in charge of this hypothetical company's house and probably do bad things to them. So the idea that tech companies are not doing something about this, it's clearly false. In fact, in 2019 alone, more than 70 million CSAM images were reported to the National Center of Missing and Endangered Children by these tech companies. And these companies cooperate with law enforcement as well. Okay, if you post something to Facebook or Twitter that is illegal, they're going to record your IP address. They're going to record your user agent and any of the other information that they get from you. I guess that this is maybe one example of all of the close tracking that these companies do to people being a good thing, since they collect a lot of information about all their users. And like I said, they will report it to police if you're doing something illegal. And I think that the events of the past few years have painted a pretty clear picture that the free market is actually much better at combating child abuse than the government is. We literally had high-ranking members of the government taking regular trips to Little St. James Island for private meetings with the CEO of Lollies, Jeffrey Epstein himself. There are literally pedophiles and people who are creepy with children in the highest rungs of politics. So if the feds really wanted to do something about CSAM and protecting our children from these creeps, they could just start with the creeps that are in their own backyards first. There's plenty of pedos right there in Washington, D.C. for you to round up. But of course, they're not going to do that, because it was never about protecting the children. It's always about increasing the power that they have over you and being to watch your every single move and hear everything you say. Now, probably the worst thing about this bill is that it's also threatening the encryption that is used by these platforms, as well as the different messaging apps, because again, think of the children. How are we going to be able to save the children from abuse when the bad man is sending images over an end-to-end encrypted communication? This is the excuse that they will use when they decide to either ban encryption because it's too dangerous, or more likely when they try to implement a backdoor into this encryption, which has already been tried before, by the way. Okay, if you don't know about this, look into dual elliptic curve deterministic random bit generator. This was an encryption protocol proposed to NIST, but it literally had a backdoor built into it that would make agencies like the NSA able to decrypt any communication that is using this algorithm. If the Earn It Act is passed, it could legally give the government the right to backdoor the encryption of these apps and these platforms, and you wouldn't even know that this backdooring is happening as you use these apps, because the government already has the ability to issue gag orders on these companies. Basically, that means that they can't talk about when they are subpoenaed or when they are contacted by law enforcement and when they are doing any changes in their back end to try and catch you during an investigation, or in some cases, they can't even talk about it after the investigation is over. The Earn It Act doesn't even outline exactly how the government will actually be able to stop CSAM. It doesn't outline any plans, any courses of action that are actually going to be able to combat this activity. All it's going to do is create a National Commission for Online Child Sexual Exploitation and Prevention. So, more bureaucracy. First of all, that part is going to be guaranteed. More of your tax money being used to fund and staff this national commission. That is going to be guaranteed. And then that money is going to be working against you to backdoor encryption and to spy on everyone that is using these platforms, since that is the only meaningful way that they could do more about CSAM than what's being done already, which again, 70 million images reported by these tech companies every year. So call your senator, call your congressman, and all of your representatives and tell them that you do not want the Earn It Act. Because like I said before, these politicians, they don't actually care about the children, okay? Lindsey Graham doesn't care about your children. They're literally just doing this because it's an election year and they want their names next to a bill that's supposed to protect children. I wouldn't be surprised if the next move they do is that they'll come up with the Save the Puppies and Everybody Gets Free Ice Cream Act. It's literally just a ploy to get votes because they really think that you're that stupid. They really think that if you're just going to read the title of this bill and say, oh man, that looks good to me, and then you're going to go down and vote for the idiot who first proposed the bill. Prove them wrong. Tell them that you hate this bill and that they will surely not keep their job if this passes.